Hello and welcome to a new episode of the devlog of Runes of Aereal, and today we'll start talking about the battle interface. And the battle interface is basically this one here. It's this layout where everything comes together. And I'm going to talk a bit about what is on this layout and what is on the event sheet which is behind it. You need to know that, of course, a lot of the logic is split up in multiple event sheets. And once your project becomes pretty complicated, it's a very bad idea to start integrating everything into a single event sheet. That event sheet is way too large. And it doesn't really matter if you've got a single event sheet or like 1,000 event sheets. In terms of performance, there will be absolutely no impact. So it's in your absolute best interest to split up the events and the functions and all logic into logical parts and group them into several event sheets. But let's see how this really works. Let me just start the game in a battle mode here so you can see what the result right now looks like. So we're currently working towards version alpha 1. That means that absolutely not all of the things are implemented which make it a minimum viable product, but we're moving towards that, and in later episodes we will be continuing on live coding sessions that work further towards that alpha version. But in this video series called Towards Alpha 1, we actually go over the entire project as it is right now at the start of the devlog, and I'm going to show you the things that are currently implemented and how they actually work. So in terms of the battle layout itself, you can see a number of things. At the bottom, of course, are the cards, which is a totally different ball game. It's not part of this video series, but what is part is like this HUD interface, for example. These are cards. This is the left deck, where all of the cards start from. They are gained, they are dealt to your hand, and once they are dealt, once they are played, rather, they are dealt here at the right-hand side to this deck at the discard pile, really. So here on top in the HUD, you've got two buttons at the left top and at the right top. At the left top, there's this button that goes to scrolls, and you can switch back to the cards, actually. And here is like a button to go to the menu, the in-game menu. And here on top, there's the HUD with the different slots for the different artifacts that are equipped. And then the energy points, the shield, the health, details on the hero, the number of coins, and the number of experience. And at the bottom right here, there's the button to end your turn. So that's what's basically right now on the battle interface for the user visible. If we look at that in design time, we see that there's a lot of extra things on there which is not visible for the user actually. Let's start on top. Here we've got a timer object. It's off screen, but it's actually a pretty important system object, let's say. I use it for two different things, actually. Actually three different things, which I'll come back to later, but the primary objective here is to have in-game timers that are not linked to any specific object. Second is it also has the tween behavior to start tweens based on a value, and where the value of that tween is then used somewhere else. And second, it's got like instance variables here that act as variables that need passing along to other stuff in your logic. And right now it's mainly used for repetition cards. I'll come back to that in a later video on how it exactly works, but please do remember this timer object is pretty important in the logic because it serves as like a central object that to do stuff which is not linked to another object in your project. So if you look at the layers, there's this fade layer. The fade layer is actually just a background color black, which is not transparent, which is used to fade in and fade out the layout. There's a separate video on fading in and out on the channel, or there's going to be a separate video if it's not uploaded yet. The FPS is only to show the FPS label here and to have some debugging information, which should be disabled, of course, whenever the game is released. There's a scroll layer, which I'm really not sure anymore where it's used. I think it's to place scrolls upon. And then there's multiple layers for effects. So effects that need to go over the HUD, effects that need to go behind and in front of characters. Depending on the effect, the effects are placed on a separate layer, so they go over a HUD, behind the enemy, before the enemy, and stuff like that. So this is for effects. This is the layer where hints are placed upon. These are the layers for the in-game menu. So this one here. A separate layer for the HUD items, which of course has no scale rate and no parallax. And that means it stays there on top, whatever happens. The edge blur is actually to make the edges of the screen more blurred. So it has the only effect that has really is that makes the game more dark. It gives you the game a dark intensity, really. That's the edge blur. It's very cosmetic, actually. The loot display is the layer where the loot, of course, is going to be displayed. The cards, you've got another scroll here. For scrolls, I presume, for cards, to put cards on. The message is like this fight thing is the message. You will see in later videos that the message is also used to display other things than fight or next turn, etc. So this is the message. There's a layer for blurring effects. So in some cases the background is blurred, and then this blur effect is used. The platform is this thing at the bottom where the players stand on. Spawners is for loot spawners, for example, where these things are placed like dummy objects, which is invisible in the game, but they have their separate layers. You can see that here. These are spawners for enemies. Enemy HUD for the enemy HUDs, of course, and you can see here that there is already an enemy HUD on this layout. I'm not going to go in full detail. There's a separate video. There's going to be a separate video in regards to enemy HUDs, but the configuration of the enemy HUD and what it looks like is actually on this main battle layout. So whenever enemies are spawned, the enemy HUDs are spawned on the enemy HUD layer, actually. And then there's some layers for the props and the foreground and the background and the trees, so they can be randomized, really. Later in the game development we will have other backgrounds and stuff like that, but that's really all nice to haves and not really part of the minimal viable product here. This all tweaking and polishing, that's going to be done in later phases. But right now we've got midground fog, trees, etc. This is going to be more generic in the future, but that's not for now. The characters, of course, is where all the characters stand, meaning the main hero here and the enemies. The loot is where loot will reside. Enemy highlighter is for the enemies. Whenever you play a game and you target a card at an enemy, there's like a column coming with some blurry white stuff. That's for the enemy highlighters. And then the rest is really background stuff, where stuff resides that is for the background. So that's it. This is in regards to the layer. And you can see some other helper items here. For example, this one here. No, it's going to be probably on HUD. Let's do that. Here, this one is the button show point for this scroll button. If you press the scroll button, this button goes down and this button goes up. And if you press that button again, they are switched once again. And in order for the game to remember the exact placing of these buttons in the interaction, two separate invisible sprites had been placed to just act as placeholders. And here the DL and the DR are deck left and deck right respectively, and they also serve as placeholders for cards. And here at the bottom we've got a hand point, and the hand point is used to arrange the cards on the hand, like in an arc. So we'll come back to that later when we see how that works, the arranging of hands. And then there's the scroll spawn point, and this is the point where scrolls are being spawned when the game starts. And whenever we switch to the scrolls, these scrolls go from off screen, which is off screen here, several pixels down. They go onto the hand point and the cards go down, and when we switch back to the cards they switch around again. So this is also a placeholder for the scrolls to remember where to spawn and where to go back to whenever we switch from scrolls to cards again. So here on top we see the hint itself. There's a hint label. Let me just lock this stuff. Lock selection. I believe the hint is on a separate layer. Yeah, let's unlock that. You can see this is the hint text. This is where the hints get written into whenever there's one. This is the hero, of course. These are the states of the hero. We'll come back to hero states in later videos. Of course, the texts of the turns, of the coins, of the health, and then there's of course the animations. Let me click on an animation. You can see here how the animations work, and here again a text and another animation for the shield here. You can see how that works, and then some text for the experience. The button for the discard, whenever a card needs to be discarded, this button appears, but it has really different uses, this button. It can be used for discarding cards, but it can also be used for other functions in the game, really. So it's real smack in the middle here. Also the collect button to collect the loot is here smack in the middle. This red here, let's unlock unlock all on HUD. This red thing here is a card swiper, and this is actually used in the interaction when a card is dropped or hovering over here. Then that means it can be dropped onto the canvas really and played. Whenever that's not the case, that means that actually the card is too low, and when the user lets go of the card, it gets thrown back into the hand. Actually, that's what happens. So it's like a let's see, a highlighting place for the cards to hover over. And the LPs are the loot spawning points here, where the loot spawns whenever there is loot, of course. And this large shield here is like also for messages. It'll be in the message layer. And we see here the player state icon with ID 99 is actually the message. So whenever we get strong or feeble or weak or whatever, there will be a message shown indicating that the player has received that status, let's say, and it will go along with an icon also displaying that, and from there it goes up into these icons here at the top. So basically it's the same icon, but where these ones have IDs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this one has ID 99, which really stands out, and you can pick it in an event sheet just by doing pick by evaluate ID equals 99. So a lot going on already here. The last thing here I would like to say is we have these things. This is the staff, the glowing thing in the staff, which is pinned to the character at runtime. And also these are the eyes of the character, which are behind here to make them glow on and off. These are also on these on this battle layout. In terms of events, you'll see that if we go to the events sheet that there's not too much going on here. It's a moderately used event sheet, but the most things actually happening on the startup layout, because it's very important, of course, that whenever the battle starts, it is initializing everything properly. So we set up the fade in process by setting the fade layer to opacity 100, which effectively means that the screen goes black because that layer is not transparent and has a background color of black. Then all the effects on the layout are disabled. There are several effects on the layout, or there can be several effects on the layout depending on what happens, and they are all disabled, of course. Then the sphere, the particles, there are also particles on that blue star sphere to make that that sphere shine a little bit. Those particles and those eyes are pinned to the hero, which I've called Achilles. And then the command queue and history are reset. There's a separate video on command queue and command history, how exactly that works. But here we're just resetting that command queue and command history for a new battle. We disable the blur. So blur background, there's a parameter blur. If it's 0, it means don't blur. If it's 1, we do blur. We need to do some randomization here. That's on my to-do list. It's going to come ranging from actually randomization of the bushes to randomization or indication of types of backgrounds, like not only a forest but also a town or a cave or whatever. That's all on the long-term to-do list. We hide a message if there is one. We hide the enemy HUD. Actually, we're effectively hiding this HUD here because no enemies have been spawned up until that point. So actually what this does is destroy the enemy HUD, which is already the design time HUD, which is there from the start. So then we initialize sound effects and create probability tables. This initialize sound effects will load the settings for the volume of the sounds, actually, what is the volume of the music, what is the volume of the sound effects. This will create probability tables for randomization, really. We turn off the flashing of the next turn button. Here again, there's a parameter, bar flash. If it's 0, it's not flashing. If it's 1, it's flashing. We load all the configuration values and we wait for that. We load the inventory and we also wait for that. We load the state values, which is how many health the player has, how many shield he has, how many experience, how many coins, stuff like that. This is the state values. We create the scrolls at the scroll point we just saw. We hide the menu if it should be shown, and we prepare the battle. And preparing the battle, we'll do a video separately on that, is actually spawning enemies, for example. It's everything to do with doing stuff before spawning, before starting a battle. And then we go and check if we are debugging. And if we are debugging, that means we're just pressing play. Here we go to the battle and we press play. Then we're actually debugging. That means that the game mode is game mode debug. And then we'll create a deck based on a deck definition. So what a deck definition is and how that is created is part of another video. But do remember, this is something for debug reasons. In order not to be able to constantly change decks and manage decks to test everything, I've got predefined deck definitions, so that's for that. For map, we need to get into that further. That's for further sessions, actually. And the sandbox, if it's sandbox, we just create all the cards in the equip deck. So this is for the level indicators. Actually, I have levels in level indicators. You can see those here. These are here on top. I'm not at this time, recording of this video, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with those because it's really flexible. I've created them, or I had them created by a guy, by someone on Fiverr, but I'm not really, I don't really know what I'm going to do with them yet. Anyhow, they are there, and now they are based on a variable called level. Not really sure yet, but that's what it does. Then we sort out the active, the placeholders here. The placeholders itself, those are these ones here. This one, for example, and this one. Now, standard there are 8 on the battle layout here, but okay, not all of them will be activated because the number of artifacts you're going to have at the same time depends on a number of things and is progressive during the gameplay. So what we do here is check for a artifact slots variable, and or everything that's below or equal that we make visible, or else we make it invisible. And then we place the artifacts we have in use. For that there is a dictionary here where we see which artifacts are currently in use, and we place them there. We set the avatar correctly, and then we put the count of the cards on the deck left and the deck right. We put them correctly. So those are these here. How many cards are on this deck, or how many cards are on this deck. Deck left count, deck right count. And this is what we're doing here. Deck left count, deck right count. And we're attaching them actually to this card back. We're attaching them to the card back of the deck left and the deck right. That's what we do here. And we initialize the cards button. That's the button at the top left. And we refresh the hero states. The hero states are these states right here. So it could be that the sandbox indicates that the hero is weak or feeble or strong at the start of a battle. And then this needs to refresh that as well to show the current value. Then the timer object, which I explained earlier, is going to fade in the layout using a tween value. And then there's a lot of stuff happening on every tick, actually. We set the opacity of the eyes of the hero and also the eyes of one of the spiders to something based on value of a sign behavior of that object. And we make sure that the sign behavior never goes below 30 and never goes above 80. That's what this clamp function does. Actually, it keeps this value, whatever it may be, between those two parameters. So it's actually glowing up and down, but never reaching full opacity and never reaching no opacity. Then we go update all of the text here, the number of turns, number of health, etc., because they are reflecting the value of a variable. You see these variables here, and also we update the FPS, GPU utilization, etc., for debug reasons, of course. And then we go and update the player animation. If there's no more health, we just make it invisible. But if there's more than 0 health, we set the animation, and the animation is based on the division of health by max health. It's actually a percentage, giving me a percentage between 0 and 1. Then we multiply by 10 and again by 10, so we make that into a string. And if we do that, that means that we can effectively set the animation to a number which is between 10 and 100. So the name of the animations are multiples of 10. And here we make this division here into a multiple of 10 so that it can be selected nicely. Then we check if the next turn button is flashing, and then we replace a color here to make it flash. We use the sign behavior on the next turn button to make it glow a bit, glow on and off. And then we set the value of the text really of the deck left count and deck right count. So these are these ones here. We refresh that. We check for all of the scrolls, how many scrolls there are, and if they're not part of loot, because scrolls can be loot, and if a scroll is part of loot, then the isLoot instance variable will be 1, but standard when the scroll is created to be used in the game, the isLoot variable will be 0. So we just go and pick that one, and then we can update the scroll counter. And the scroll counter is a label here, and it says so many scrolls available, and we just do that using a picked count here. So much left to use, or so much scrolls available. That's what we see here. And then every tick we do the fade tween, and whenever the fade tween is finished, we start the battle. That's actually what this does. It's not really too much. Main things are focused here on the start of layout and updating some stuff on the layout whenever something changes. And basically that's about it. So all of the other logic is contained within all of the other event sheets here, which is part of other videos, of course. So that's it. I hope that was informative. As always, please like and subscribe. And if you want the full source code of the game, please support me on my Patreon page. The links are in the description. Bye-bye.